Div Bensali. We'll be joined by Chester Elton, who will be speaking about how the best managers create a culture of belief to drive big results. We'll be getting started with that in just about 6 minutes here at the top of the hour, 6 or 7 minutes. Just a reminder, if you have not downloaded Chester's handout yet, his presentation handout, you can go under the Handouts tab and go ahead and download his PDF there and follow along as Chester goes through the presentation. Also, if you'd like to check on your audio options, you can open up the audio tab on the GoToWebinar control panel, and you'll see options for either computer audio or phone call. If you select phone call, it'll give you a dial-in number. And welcome to today's expert webinar presented by AccountantsWorld. Today, our speaker will be Chester Elton, leadership expert and founder of The Culture Works, and he'll be presenting on All In, how the best managers create a culture of belief to drive big results. I want to thank you again for joining us today. My name is Div Bensali. I'm a vice president at AccountantsWorld. We're really excited to have you on board for a talk that I'm really looking forward to, both personally and for all of us collectively as well. I've heard Chester speak before. He's a really compelling speaker and has a really unique voice in terms of workplace dynamics and leadership. So looking forward to getting started here in just a couple of minutes. A couple of housekeeping items before we do get started. If you would like to use the GoToWebinar control panel at any given point, and if you don't see it, just look for the orange arrow. That orange arrow will expand or hide the panel at any time. To see your audio options, you can select the audio tab and then select either computer audio or phone call. If you select phone call, you'll receive a dial-in number and an access code to be able to dial in to here at that point. You're also going to see a Handouts tab. That Handouts tab includes a PDF file that is Chester's presentation that he's going to be going through today. So if you haven't downloaded that handout yet, please go ahead and do so so you can follow along there. And if you have any questions for Chester at any point, please go ahead and send them at any point during the presentation today. And Chester and I will be trying to answer them throughout the presentation and potentially afterwards as well if we have more left over at that point. Also wanted to mention in the bottom left-hand corner of each of my slides, you're going to see that hashtag expert webinar, all one word. You can use that on Twitter to follow along with us or to tweet out any insights that you think are particularly interesting from today's presentation. Tom on our side is going to be tweeting out as well from there, so look forward to keeping the conversation going on Twitter. We do offer one free CP for this webinar today, and that's based on active participation in the live presentation. Active participation means three things. You attend the live webinar for no less than 50 minutes. You respond to all of the polling questions. I believe there are going to be 4 today. And then once you close out of the webinar window in your browser, you'll see a post-webinar survey pop up. You go ahead and you fill that out and submit it. If you don't see that pop up right away, no worries. You're going to get an email from AccountantsWorld thanking you for attending this webinar today. And that will include another link to that survey as well. So just make sure to go ahead and fill in the survey after you receive that email if you haven't already done so. You'll be notified by email about your CP within the next few business days. It may take into early next week for that. And the one other thing I always mention to people is to please add webinar@accountantsworld.com to your trusted email list, whether that's to your contacts or your trusted list, whatever it might be, to make sure that any emails from us are able to make it through to you. A brief word about AccountantsWorld. AccountantsWorld is a leading provider of accounting and payroll solutions for professional accountants. And one of the things that we are really proud to unveil at this point is we have just started a brand new webinar. It's a twice a weekly webinar. You can attend at any point, twice each week. And it's called How to Build a Premier Client Accounting Services Practice. So many of us have heard of CAS. There has been a ton of coverage of it in industry publications. But there's still a lot of confusion about both how to make the most out of CAS and what it can do for clients and for the accounting firm itself. And so we're here to help answer those questions and to show how our solutions can be part of the solution for your firm. So if you want to be able to get stronger control over client accounting so that you can best serve the needs of all of your accounting clients, if you want to be able to customize your accounting solution for every one of your clients, If you want industrial strength power so that your staff can do anything that your client's bookkeeping staff currently does, except that you can do it faster and easier and more accurately. And if you want to be able to make even things that are considered commodity services like bill payment into highly profitable services, then you can't afford to miss this webinar. Next one is coming up tomorrow, August 23rd. We'll also be having sessions on the 28th and 30th. So to sign up for any of our upcoming sessions, you can simply go to profitablecas.com, profitablecas.com, all one word, and you can register there. It only takes 2 minutes to do. The webinar is less than an hour long, and whether you're in the market for a accounting solution or not, if you're thinking about offering CAS or building a more profitable CAS practice, I highly encourage you to please go ahead and sign up as soon as possible there. Before I turn it over to Chester Elton, just a brief word about Chester. He's one of America's most influential voices in the field of workplace trends and leadership. He's been featured in a number of media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, NPR, and Fast Company. And he has over 20 years of experience in helping clients engage their employees to execute on strategy, vision, and values. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chester Elton and turn the floor over to him.
Great. Can you see my slides there yet?
I'm just about to turn it over. Let me go ahead and get this in. Okay, you should see a prompt on your side in just a second, Chester.
Yep, there we go. All set?
All set.
Perfect. Hey, listen, thanks for that introduction. I thought I might add just a little bit to that. This last Saturday, my wife and I celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary, and I would hate to have an introduction go without mentioning that. Kind of a big milestone for us. And if you ever have the chance to meet my lovely wife, Heidi, being married to her for 35 years makes me the luckiest guy you'll ever know. So with that little caveat and a little bit of personal review there, let's get into our webinar. And thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you very much for your time. I know everybody's busy, and this is a topic that's particularly near and dear to my heart about how you build the right culture. Just a little bit of a review on our work. And I say our work, I've got a wonderful co-author named Adrian Gostick. And our work started in reward and recognition. We wrote a great little book called The Carrot Principle, based on a very simple premise that, you know, when you work hard at work and you do something great, somebody notices it and they celebrate it and they say thank you. And we saw some great business results when you had that kind of culture of appreciation, right? People stayed longer, had higher engagement scores, and actually translated as well to better customer engagement scores. The thing that was really interesting to us, though, is that as we started to get into a deeper dive with our clients and really look at the workplace, it became very apparent to us that if you didn't get the culture right, the recognition didn't matter. And that was kind of an interesting area for us to delve into, because we thought, well, the recognition builds the great culture. And in fact, it was just the opposite, that you had to have the culture established first, and then the recognition would reinforce all those good behaviors. So we took a look at what were the key elements of high performance cultures. And I want to share with you the roadmap, and I'm delighted that you've got the PDF to download this, because these are the key elements. Now, we're not going to go into every element or every step of the roadmap. We simply don't have time. What I wanted to share this with you, though, is that this transcended industry, it transcended even geographic and cultural boundaries. That as we looked at a wonderful global database on what were the elements of great cultures, these were the 7 steps and the 3 E's that showed up no matter where we were in the world. Well, that's what led us to publish it in our book, All In: How the Best Managers Create a Culture of Belief that Drives Big Results. And let me share with you the definition that I like when you talk about a great culture, or what we call an all-in culture, is that your organization, the people that work and live there, that they believe what they do matters, right? There's a belief that what they do matters, that it has impact, that they make a difference, not only for their customers, but for their coworkers and in their communities where they live and work. And then I always like to add at the end there And when I do something that matters and I make a difference, somebody noticed it and said thank you. Right back to that carrot principle. Well, we've got a polling question. We love to start our books off with a great story. And the story that we started off with in our book All In was a story about a really interesting character in history named the Great Blondin. So I'm going to turn this over for the expert polling to take over. We're going to give you some choices. Can you identify the identity of who the Great Blondin actually was? Is it Reese Witherspoon, Pamela Anderson, Marilyn Monroe, a French tightrope walker, or a tight French rope walker? Go ahead.
All right, sounds great.
And
So I see a number of you have already started to vote. So please go ahead and select one of those five options. Make sure to click the submit button to make sure that your vote is counted. And just a reminder, this is the first of our four polling questions today. Voting in all of them is required in order to earn CPE.
excellent. So what's your guess? What's your guess there, Div?
You know what? Only 94% of people have voted so far, Chester. I don't want to bias the other 6% by giving my suggestion, but I'll give you a hint. It's not any of the first three. So,
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
all
I
right.
love
So
go ahead.
let's let's go ahead and give about 5 to 10 more seconds here, folks, for anybody who has not yet voted. So please get your vote in. Going once, going twice. Okay, so here we go, Chester. 63% said a French tightrope walker, followed by Marilyn Monroe, and then a little bit under 10% for each of the other three options there.
Yeah, well, the 63% are absolutely right. I would really like to meet the 2% that voted for a tight French rope walker. That sounds like they'd be fun people to party with.
I think that's a different webinar that we host, actually.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I mean it's great fun. Here are the slides that I have. It is a French tightrope walker. Now, it's really interesting. His name is actually Jean-Francois Gravelet. He grew up in the circus tents of Europe. And the way he marketed himself and the way he lived his life, I think, is a great example of being all in. One of the great things about Jean-Francois Gravelet is while he grew up in the circus tents of Europe and was quite a renowned performer there, he always wanted to come to the New World, to come to America. When he embarked on that tour, he thought, well, I've got to do something to really spark people's interest. I want them to get some buzz in the press and so on. And so he was the first acrobat to take a 1,700-foot wire and string it across Niagara Falls and cross the falls. No safety net, no safety cord, no nothing. And it was a huge success. I don't know if you've ever been to Niagara Falls. Your first idea is not, hey, why don't we string a wire across that and see if we can cross it, right? It's treacherous, it's deep, it's magnificent in so many ways. Well, it worked. He got in all the newspapers, he got all the press he could imagine. And so he wanted to then make this his routine. And he understood in entertainment what we understand in business. And that's that you just can't come back and do the same trick over and over again. He came back to the United States several times, and every time he would kick off his tour, it would be in Niagara Falls. Well, as legend has it, on June 30th, 1859, the Great Blondin shows up to Niagara Falls, and 25,000 people show up to see him perform. Now, when you think about upstate New York in 1859, 25,000 people, that's pretty much everybody, okay? Everybody shows up. And being the showman, he starts to work the crowd. And he calls out and he says, "Who believes I can cross the falls?" And the crowd cheers, "We believe." And he calls out again, "Who believes I can cross the falls with my little wheelbarrow?" And they all cheered, "We believe." You see, he would come back and he would do various stunts. I love the way he varied his routine. One time he came back and he went across on stilts, and one time he went across on a bicycle, and another time blindfolded. But most often he would show up with this little wheelbarrow that you see in the picture. And my favorite stunt he did with the wheelbarrow is he stopped in the middle of the falls and he pulled out a kerosene stove and he cooked an omelet, right? And the crowd went crazy, because he's French. And so as he starts calling out, "Do you believe? Do you believe? Do you believe?" They all responded, "Yes, I believe you can cross it. I believe, that you can do it." And then he asked the most important question. He said, "Who believes I can cross the falls with my little wheelbarrow?" And they said, "Yeah." And he said, "Great. Then which one of you will get in the wheelbarrow?" Right? And a hush fell over the crowd, right? You know, when you get in those stressful situations, right? You break eye contact, tie your shoe, spot on your tie, whatever. And it was really interesting that finally one guy at the very back of the crowd, waved his silk top hat and said, "I'll get in." It was his best friend and his manager, Harry Coldcourt. And the great Blondin stopped him. He said, I wanted to prove a point, Harry. I don't need you to get in the wheelbarrow. I want to prove a point. And the point is this, that it's easy to say you believe, but when I know you're real on is, or all in, is when you get in the wheelbarrow, right? Will you make that commitment? Well, as a tribute to Harry, the next time he came to Niagara Falls, he actually put him on his back and took him across the falls. That tremendous show of faith and friendship, right? So, with that story in mind, there's two questions we want to talk about today. First off, are you as a leader, are you all in? In other words, are you completely committed to the mission, vision, and values of the company where you lead, where you live, where you work? And by the way, when we talk about leadership, we're talking about everybody, right? Everybody leads in their own way. Leadership isn't just designated by a title. Leadership are those people that get things done, right? And then, of course, the second question is your team all in? If you can't answer yes to the first question, you're clearly not going to get yes to the second. And for almost 2 decades now, Adrian and I have been studying leadership. And we'll tell you that the greatest leaders, and this is something that you've known, right? The greatest leaders, they lead by example. And if you think back to the best bosses you've ever had, I guarantee you that they were, examples of where you wanted to go as an organization, how you wanted to get there, and you wanted to emulate, their leadership behavior. Well, new research, right? We took a look at it. It was really interesting. It was the largest survey ever done on the core elements of cultures. It was given access to us by Willis Towers Watson. It was conducted, there's the big elephant. Your next polling question is, how large was the study? And so I'll turn it back to you, Div, and we'll pull up the polling questions and see if we can get an answer to this one too.
Okay, sounds great. So the second poll question is up and running at this point. How large was the study? Four choices in front of you. Please go ahead and select one of those. Make sure to click the submit button as well.
And this study, as we conducted it, Dave, it was right in the heart of the recession. So it was really interesting as we looked at top cultures, what were the elements that weathered that particular storm. But as we're waiting for the polling to come in, I'm interested to ask you, Div, have you ever had a leader that you really admired, that you loved working for, that didn't live the mission, vision, and values of where you worked? I'm curious.
No, I don't. I don't think so. And my first thought when you were mentioning that before is if they're not living it, there's something disingenuous about them than espousing it. And if they're being disingenuous about that, I think as an employee, I would immediately wonder what else they're being disingenuous about.
Exactly. And it's interesting, when we asked the question for, employees that had a great leader, whether it was a team leader or CEO, we asked them this important question: do you trust them? And when there was high admiration, there was always high trust. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Hmm. That's right. All right, let's give 5 seconds here for folks to get their vote in if they haven't voted already. Going once, going twice. Okay, Chester. So we
Yes.
see just over half said 2-year study of 300,000 people, and then 35% said 20-year study of 30,000 people.
Yeah, the 54% have it right. We've got smart people on the webcast today. Yeah, it's an amazingly large number of people, and when you work in statistics, and I know a lot of you do, that's a ridiculously high database, right? And we'll just kind of jump through here. Um, it's accurate in plus or minus point 0.5%. So we felt really good about the data. Now the next thing we did was we took a look at where are some great brands that have huge followings, that really have loyal customers. Now I'm going to throw some logos up here and see what you think. I mean, take a look at Disney. I'm sure we've got a lot of Disney fans. Div, are you a big Disney guy? Have you been to Disneyland or Disney World?
I haven't been in a long time, but I've got a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old, so I think I've got a number of trips in my future.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And your impression of the brand of Disney, what is it? What comes to mind?
I think very professional, very polished. Everything they put out has a really high degree of of polish to it and really reflects the brand. You don't ever see a Disney thing that looks half finished or cheap. It's consistent in the way it's presented.
Yeah, it's great quality. And their slogan is it's the happiest place on earth, right? Now,
Hmm.
I know it's not cheap to go to Disney, right?
Right.
It's expensive to go, and yet people go time and time and time again. Now, it's really interesting. I was talking to the guys at Disney, and I said, "What is your number one value?" And people would say, "Well, it's happiness or it's fun or it's whatever." You know what it is? It's safety. And you think about it, you're going to take your little kids to Disney and you want them to have an amazing experience. More than anything, you want it to be safe. So I thought that was really interesting. So Disney, Amazon, I mean, are any Amazon Prime fans out there? I will tell you, I think that Amazon Prime is like the greatest invention of all time, right? If you've got something you need and your Prime, it shows up the next day. And, we celebrate Christmas in my house. And yeah, I think it was December 20th, 5 days to Christmas. I hadn't bought one gift and I wasn't even remotely panicked, right? I knew they would deliver. And then it's kind of interesting. You take a look and say, well, how do you want people to feel when they see your logo? Whatever logo you put in that space. What do you want that visceral reaction to be? And not just, right, not just the logo of your customers, but your employees. Are they proud to say, this is where I work, right? And what is your leadership brand? We took a look and it was really interesting that your culture and your brand are inextricably connected, right? I love this quote from Bill Emerson, the then CEO of Quicken Loans, who, by the way, had been on the best places to work list for like 12 years in a row. He says, if you don't create a culture at your company, a culture will create itself. And if you haven't nurtured the right one, it's not going to be the culture you want. And I thought that was great advice because culture is not the year-end banquet. It's not your commercials. It's not what you put out in the press. It's the way you live every day. It's the way you feel about coming to work every day. So what we really looked at is we said, look, how do the best cultures get that kind of buy-in? How do they get people to really be all in every day? Again, back to the roadmap. If you look at the core of that roadmap, you've got the 3 E's: engage, enabled, and energized. Now, a lot of work has been done around engagement. And interesting to me, Dev, that we worked for many years with the conference board in their engagement institute. And here we've been focusing on getting employees more engaged over the last 20 years. And in the last 20 years, there's been a steady decline. In fact, their number is 87% on a global survey of employees were either disengaged or actively disengaged. Now, actively disengaged means that you have people coming to work that are actually working against what you want to do. These are people that if you could identify them, you should probably pay them to stay home, right? So a lot of work done on engagement. We took a look at the other 2 E's really carefully though. Enabled, I've got the tools to do my job, the training, and I've got this sense of well-being, this emotional connection to work. Well, what does it mean to be engaged at work? Quick review. We had a wonderful 200,000 survey that we looked at around engagement. What drives engagement? Development and well-being was the number one driver across all cultures. Trust was number two. Pride in the organizational symbol. Again, back to those logos, right? Am I proud to tell people where I live and work? And while we found this fascinating, what we wanted to know is what are the drivers of the drivers? Goal setting and accountability. In other words, we keep our promises, drove pride in the organization. Communication was a high driver of trust. Appreciation, which we loved because that brought us back to the carrot principle, right? The number one driver of the number one driver is people had to be valued at work, that emotional connection. Well, looking at that and saying, okay, then let's look at how it impacts the bottom line. And again, from a Willis Towers Watson database, hundreds of thousands of people surveyed, it also added up to growth. We all get that we should treat our people well, whether they're on our teams or within our organization. The key though is can we connect that to profitability? Now, I will admit, and I feel intimidated talking to Accountants World, right? You guys are numbers guys. I don't have my PhD in stats, neither does Adrian. I took the mandatory stats class at the University of British Columbia in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. And I will admit, I was in the half of the class that made the upper half of the class possible, okay? So we hired really smart guys to look at this data, and we would ask them simple questions. If we say this, is it true? And we said, look, can you have high operating income? Can you have highly engaged employees that do not feel valued and appreciated? And they said, you know what, it's almost statistically impossible. So it gave us great confidence in the previous work we'd done, and the fact that not only was this a nice thing to do, but it was also good business, right? So enabled at work. And I have a great Disney story for you, Dev, because I know you're going to be spending a lot of time there with your kids at some point. Well, I picked this up out of the press, and it was just such a heartwarming story. I don't know if many of you out there have friends or people in your family that have autism. The story was written about a family going to Disney World with their autistic son. Now they have other children, right? And they love Disney. And as you know, it's not cheap, right? So they had a tough time with their autistic son in that in his spectrum of autism, loud noises, big crowds, and so on, after a while become really disturbing to him. Well, they get to Disney and they get there bright and early. And they're going down Main Street and they see all the vendors and they see these big balloons. And he asks his mom, he says, hey, can I have a purple Mickey balloon, purple being his favorite color? And she has this idea. She said, you know what? You can. If you can stay the whole day at Disney, if you can get through the whole day, at the end of the day, I'll make sure we get you a purple Mickey balloon. And she said it was remarkable. He was engaged, he was happy, and very focused on getting his balloon at the end of the day. She said it was the best day we'd ever had at Disney. Well, come the end of the day, they're coming back down Main Street, and her son says, Mom, purple balloon. She goes, got it. They go to the first vendor, balloons, no purple. Next vendor, balloons, no purple. Third vendor, no purple Mickey balloons. And at this point, she starts to panic a little bit. And this is what I love about the Disney culture. One of the employees just on the concourse there realizes she's in distress, right? Safety, number one value. She goes over and says, excuse me, I can tell you're a little upset. What can I do to help? And she tells her the story of the purple balloon. And he says, do you know what? I got this. I will be right back. Goes to the back, blows up a purple Mickey balloon, and comes back. Well, Viv, here's your skill testing question. How much do you think he charged her for that balloon? What would be your guess?
I'm gonna guess nothing because it's Disney.
Exactly. I mean, I would say, look, if you're ever going to overcharge somebody, that's your opportunity to double the price, right? But no, of course it was free. He gave it to her for free. How many people do you think they told that story to? How many, that article went viral, all because there was an enabled employee at Disney that solved the problem. It didn't cost a lot of time. It didn't cost a lot of money. And yet it saved the day. She went on to say in the article, she said, had we not been able to get that purple balloon, it would have ruined every good experience we had that day. And I don't know that any of us would have gotten any sleep. So you got to love Disney. So what does it mean to be energized at work? This is my favorite. This is where you have this emotional connection. I don't know if many of you on the line are Canadians. I'm a proud Canadian, born in Edmonton, grew up in Vancouver. WestJet is the Canadian version of Southwest Airlines, except they're just a little nicer because, as we all know, Canadians are just a little nicer than everybody else. Anyway, every year they perform this kind of really cool event or trick for their customers. The one that I was my favorite is one Christmas. What they did is they set up a kiosk right where you board the planes, and they had this interactive kiosk with Santa Claus. It was in December, and you'd scan your boarding pass, and Santa Claus would pop up, and you'd have this video conference, and he would ask you, "What do you want for Christmas?" And of course, there were all kinds of things. There was one guy who said, "I want a tablet." Another guy said, "I want a big screen TV." One kid said, "I want a train." One guy even said, "I just need new socks and underwear." Right? Well, what they didn't know is on the back end, the WestJetters, which is what they call their employees, all took off and went out and bought those gifts for their passengers. So that when the plane landed, when they went back to baggage claim, they had snow came down. They had these, instead of their luggage, their packages were coming out, all wrapped with exactly what they wanted. Well, you can imagine. I mean, they were just dumbfounded. They were like, let me get this straight. I make a wish, I get on a plane, and I get off the plane, and there it is, all wrapped in exactly what I want. For those of you that want to see the full video, because they took out like a 10-minute video, they posted it on YouTube. It's called the WestJet Christmas Miracle, and I encourage you to go. It's just remarkable, the engagement on the passenger side, even more so the engagement on the employee side. The employees were just so thrilled to pull this off. And if you want to have some fun, go to the outtakes, because there's a guy that literally says, I want, new socks and underwear. And Santa says to him, oh, are you sure you don't want a big screen TV? Because the people that asked for the big screen TV got that too. Well, the video goes viral, and it was fascinating that well over 40 million people, I think it was 44 million and counting, have seen that video. And here's what just answer this in your head. How many Canadians are there? No, about 33 million, right? So you talk to any Canadian that you know and you ask them about the WestJet Christmas thing, they all know it. They didn't buy any commercials. They performed this really incredible act of kindness for their passengers, and it built a brand beyond what you could ever imagine. And again, that energized, that emotional engagement. If you ever have a chance to fly WestJet, don't pass it up. So energized at work, right? And what does it mean when you put those three E's together to your bottom line, right? You're all numbers, folks. Look at this. Companies, again, Willis Towers Watson was our partner in this study. Companies with low engagement around operating income, about 10%. You get high engagement, you get that, 4-point jump. And by the way, that's huge, right? A 4-point jump in engagement, when you tie that to your bottom line, is tremendous. Look what happens when you add that emotional attachment to work, that engagement piece. It doubles productivity, it doubles operating, margins. So this idea of engaging your employees, of engaging, enabling, and energizing your folks, when the three come together, that's when you start to see really high performance cultures, really high performance cultures. Well, with the limited time we've got, I wanted to give you some really practical things to take back to your teams and to your organizations. So I want to jump to step 6. In the introduction, we talked about the work we did in the carrot principle. And we never found a high performing culture. We never found a highly engaged culture that didn't have a culture of celebration. And we call it, they root for each other, right? They cheer for each other. So we took a look at other studies around positive cultures. Cotter and Haskett at the Harvard School of Business did this 11-year study, that in a culture where you stayed agile, where you had that high value on the employee, again, I believe what I do matters, I make a difference, and somebody noticed it and said, thank you, and encouraged leadership from everyone. Remember, we talked about that. Leadership isn't just a title. Leadership are the people that get things done. Well, take a look at the numbers, right? Stupid numbers, by the way. You probably shouldn't put these on a slide and have people look at it, because the growth is beyond believable. That's the credibility that Harvard Business School brings, though. Over an 11-year study, this is exactly what happened. Now, when we get into this part of leadership and we get into this part of culture, I often get a lot of pushback. And people will say, look, this is the softer side of business. And I get we should be nice. I've got to get hard things done. What was really interesting, I was doing this conference for an investment group in Pennsylvania. And their head of leadership development came on stage. And this is what she said, and it stuck with me. She said, we always talk about the hard stuff, the numbers, the spreadsheets, productivity and all that. She said, you know what? I'm going to talk to you about the soft stuff, the human side of business. And I'm here to tell you that the soft stuff is the hard stuff. And when you get the soft stuff figured out, the hard stuff gets easier. And I thought, you know what? She's exactly right. It's nothing that you don't already know, by the way. This is the stuff your mom taught you. And if you think about it, what did your mom teach you when you were 5 or 6 years old? Div, think about that for a minute. I'm sure your mom or dad said to you, remember to say thank you. Clean up after yourself. Leave the place a little better than you found it, right? Be kind. Don't hit, don't push, don't bite, right? Still good advice, by the way. It's the stuff your mom and dad taught you. Well, this is a picture of my mom and dad. That's John Dalton Elton and his lovely bride, Irene Tanner Elton, right? And my mom loves that I show this picture. And it's really as a tribute. I think a lot of the business principles we learned and a lot of the leadership principles we learned from our mom and dad. Well, how do we execute this, right? We found a remarkable leader at Avis Budget Rental Car. His name is Carlos Aguilera. He's the one in the yellow shirt there in the bottom right-hand corner. And as we were, doing some research on great cultures and great leaders, Carlos Aguilera just was top of the charts for everything. I mean, just everything, right? He had high engagement, low turnover, high customer satisfaction. And so Avis gave us an opportunity to talk with him. And I said, so Carlos, what are you doing with your people that you're getting such phenomenal numbers? And he started to go down this list of a bunch of stuff that he did. And finally, I stopped him and I said, Carlos, that's a lot of questions, um, or that's a lot of stuff you're doing. If you had one thing that you wanted to share with leaders that we talk to around the world, what might that one thing be? And it was really interesting. He said, "Oh, that's easy. 10 pennies." I said, 10 pennies? What are you doing with 10 pennies? And he said, it's really interesting, Chester. He said, I grew up in organizations where my leaders were really quick to point out what I did wrong and really slow to point out what I did right. And I made a pledge to myself that if I ever got to lead, I wouldn't be one of those guys, right? That I would appreciate all the little things that have to happen every day to keep the doors open. And to remind myself, I put 10 pennies in my left pocket. And I set a goal to have 10 positive interactions with my people every day. Now, I challenge you to do this. 10 is a lot, right? That's a lot. And the thing is, to have 10 positive interactions with your people, you've got to be aware. You got to be with your people. Now, he can't always be there in person, right? He may have to text them or, call them on the phone. He's a big handwritten note guy. He'll drop a little note. And what was fascinating to me is when we were visiting with him, he's down in Dallas, Texas. He manages about 300 people. I mean, it's a big group. We were having lunch with him and he said, excuse me just a bit. It's lunchtime and I've still got 8 pennies in my left pocket, right? I got to get out and be with my people. Simple little things that he's doing every day. Nothing big, simple little things that drove those numbers. Well, here's what's really interesting. Ava sees his numbers and says, you know what? There's lessons to be learned there. And we need to spread that across the entire organization. So all over North America, they had this campaign and they took buses to all the different locations, right? And they had t-shirts and donuts and contests and they put up these big banners, which I love. You are appreciated, right? Whether you're a rental sales agent, a mechanic, a driver, washing the cars, a check-in agent, whatever it might be. The message was you, the employee, you are appreciated. And I love this banner. I thought it was pretty funny actually that they put it underneath barbed wire. You know what I mean? We love you. You can't leave, but we love you, but you can't leave, right? And the message was very clear, right? That the customer experience will never exceed the employee experience. And I love that message. You think about it. And I know many of you, and I count myself among you, we've had toxic jobs. We've had those jobs where it took every ounce of effort we had to get out of bed and get to work, right? Well, how did that translate to your interactions with not just your coworkers, but your customers? If you didn't feel like your company cared about you, why would you care about them? And why would you care about their customers? I know this is a simple concept. I think it's really profound that in order to create a great customer experience, we have to focus on creating a great employee experience, right? Well, the results were phenomenal. Year over year results after they had this campaign, they were up 32%. I mean, $1.9 billion in revenue. And they attributed a lot of that to the fact that they had this campaign, that people really did feel valued and engaged, that when they worked hard, somebody stopped and said, thank you. Well, what is the positive to negative ratio? Now, Div, do we have this one in an interactive poll? Am I turning this over
Um,
to you or I'm going through my
Let me
slides?
take a look here. Ratio of positive to negative. Yes.
Okay,
Let
great.
me go ahead and launch
This would
that
be
here.
really, yeah. What do you think it should be? One positive to one negative, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, or 5 to 1? Just intuitively, which one would you go with here?
If you had asked me this 35 minutes ago, I think my guess would have been 2 to 1. But now I'm feeling pretty confident that I'm low on that. So I think it's actually probably 5 to 1.
Yeah, well, let's see. I have a nephew that works at Amazon, and this is a different quiz just to you, Div, and it's this. How many um, how many 5-star reviews do you need to negate a 1-star review on Amazon? What do you think that number is?
Well, I've got some experience with this, with collecting reviews and positive and negative reviews. So in my experience, it's And this is in a different setting than Amazon, but in the setting that I worked in previously, I think we found the sort of break-even point was about 8 to 1, maybe even a little bit more than that.
Yeah, well, that's break even, but to negate it, at Amazon, their number is 20. Isn't that
Wow,
remarkable?
that
20
is.
to 1. And think about that. I've done that. I got something I want, and I'm looking at the reviews, and I go 5 star, 5 star, 5 star, 5 star, 1 star. I'm out. It's this, that, one negative. Well, let's reveal the answer here to our attendees.
All right, sounds good. So let's go ahead and take a look here. And 61% said 5 to 1, another 24% at 3 to 1.
Yeah, and it is absolutely 5 to 1. When I do this, when we have our keynotes, it's really interesting. This is the prompt I use on my slides. I always say, look, is it 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, or 5 to 1? Intuitively, which one would you go to, right? And it's pretty obvious that it's 5 to 1. Now, here's what's also really interesting, right? Is that Harvard School of Business took a look at this, and they say it's 5.6. Actually, Harvard, I'm surprised it wasn't 5.6937, right? What they found was 1 to 1 was negative, 2 to 1 was negative, 3 to 1 was basically neutral, 4 and 5 to 1 were positive. And I thought that was really interesting. So, Carlos Aguilera didn't know that, right? He just knew that it was a good human practice, right? And so it was really interesting to me that he would naturally come to that conclusion. Well, the more we do this work, the more Adrian and I have done this work, what we find is that work is life and life is work, right? So look at these numbers. This is from the University of Washington. They did a study of newlywed couples, and they put them in a room for 15 minutes and had them do a puzzle together. And they recorded their positive to negative ratio. If they had about a 1 to 1 ratio, they could predict with 94% accuracy that within 3 years they would be divorced. If they had at least a 5 to 1, they were still happily married. So, as you think about this, think about what is the ratio in the workplace. Think about what is the ratio in your personal life as well, because I think it's often reflected there. Well, four things as we start coming down the straightaway here in our webinar. We found that the great leaders did these four things consistently. When they praised and recognized, when they were rooting for their employees, they did it now, they did it often, they were specific in their praise, and they were sincere. So what does it mean to do it now? See, I think that recognition in a leadership toolkit is the most powerful tool that you have and the most underutilized, because it's the greatest communication tool you have, right? We value, or we celebrate what we value, right? If we're celebrating what we value, it's a way to communicate what you value most. And rewarded behavior gets repeated. And this is Pavlovian, right? The closer the recognition is to the behavior, the more likely it is to be repeated. It just makes sense. The bigger the gap, the less impact, right? If I wait till the end of the week or the end of the month or the end of the year, the longer that gap, the less impactful it has. And I know sports analogies are overrated, but when you win the championship, and Tom is who's running this whole thing. And by the way, thank you so much, Tom, for setting this all up. He's a big Eagles fan, and they're the reigning, Super Bowl champions. When you win the Super Bowl, they don't say, "Hey, we're going to wait till the end of the year and pass out all the trophies at the same time," right? Let's get the baseball guys, the hockey guys. No, you win it, you won it. And there's the big, whatever sport it is. I'm a big Devils fan, whether it's Wimbledon or it's the Olympics or the college football championships. Now, if you're an American football fan, when you win the championship, there's this weird tradition, that the winning team does for the coach, and it's the Gatorade bath, right? Now, so here's your question, Div. Does the coach enjoy that experience? Does he? What do you think?
I think it probably depends on the coach, but my guess is going to be not very much.
Actually, you're exactly wrong. He loves it because what does it mean? It means they won. They don't give the Gatorade bath to the losing coach. That would, we lost, and I'm all sticky. And of course, they don't wait till 2 weeks later when they see the coach and his family at the mall. You know, the Gatorade bath is the tradition, and trust me, the coaches love it because what it communicates is we won. We're the winners. We're the champions. Well, takes us to our next one, which is often. This is where I probably get the most pushback. And it would be interesting, just in your mind, do you think you can get too much recognition in work or not enough? Does it become trite if it's just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you? Ask yourself, when was the last time you came home from work and said to your spouse, your partner, your kids, who's ever there to greet you, you know what? I just got too much recognition at work today. I couldn't get anything done. If they just thrown one more party or give me one more piece of cake, I'm telling you, to the moon, Alice. No, the research shows that, look, you really, you can't, if it's done right, if it's done right. And I always like to take this to our personal lives. You know, if you are madly in love, right? Can you hear I love you too much? I would submit you can't. And I love you in your personal life simply translates to thank you in the workplace. And if you do it right, you can't hear it too much, right? Now, don't get that mixed up, okay? It's I love you in your personal life. It's thank you in the workplace. You get that mixed up and it's going to cause HR all kind of problems. Third one, specific. Specificity to me is the key. Now, if you're going to save one slide out of the PDF, save this one. General price has no impact. You may think, okay, I want to have this really engaging culture, and I'm going to come to work every day. It's going to be, hey, great job, great job, great job. Little finger guns. You're the best, you're the best, you're the best. Means nothing, and it gets annoying very quickly. That's the kind of recognition that I think you can absolutely get too much, and it absolutely does not translate into high engagement. Specificity does. Tell me exactly what I did and how I did it so I can replicate that behavior. Well, specificity goes a long way to being sincere. When it's very general, I think it comes across as very insincere. And I think sincerity can translate to all the different parts of your life. And I want to illustrate this with just a quick story. We spend the majority of our lives at work, whether you like it or not, right? And why are we there? Well, hopefully to support a family or some loved ones or whatever that might be, right? So don't forget the people behind the employee, right? The person that's giving you their blood, sweat, and tears every day. So a quick story about appreciating the family. I think it's a really key to very healthy cultures that you understand the entire employee, right? So I used to work for a guy named Kent Murdoch, great CEO, and I traveled a lot for Kent. And I'll never forget, I was at Dulles Airport. And for those of you that travel, you know the drill, right? You got your wheelie, your backpack, and you're on your cell phone, you're looking for your connecting flight, and you're multitasking, right? And we were talking about some customer problem, whatever it might be. We solved the problem. I closed the call. My phone rings again, and caller ID. It's my wife Heidi. My incredible wife Heidi. The call you take, no matter where you are, if you want to continue to be happily married, right? So I pick up the phone. I pick up the call, and I said, "Honey, what's up?" And she said, "Chess, you're not going to believe what just happened. A guy just dropped off 24 beautiful, long-stemmed orange roses to the house." And she said, "At first I thought they were from you." And I was pretty sure they weren't, right? And kind of curious who they were from. Well, if you look at the roses, there's a note in there. And the note was from Kent Murdoch, the guy I had just hung up with, right? You can't make it up as far as the timing goes, right? And the note said something like this. It said, "Heidi, thanks for taking care of all the big things at home. So Chester can do big things on the road for us. The sacrifice isn't lost on us. Enjoy the flowers. All the best, Kent." Right? Now, hopefully there's a bunch of you going, "Aw, isn't that sweet?" And it was very sweet. And here's the key about specificity, right? Ken knows that we love flowers and roses in particular. But did he send her 24 red roses? No, no. See, we wrote a book called The 24 Karat Manager. Orange is our color. Red roses would be really inappropriate, right? The husband's on the road, right? No, orange is our color, right? 24 is our number. Those little things are never lost on people. Take the time, right? Well, what do you think my reaction was? Two thumbs up. I was. How do you think I hit the road for Kent the next time? All in, right? The key is, how did it impact my wife? What was her attitude about me being on the road and away from home? And of course, that's the key, right? I'll tell you how the conversation ended. It was really funny. She said, "So Chess, where are you?" I said, "I'm at Dulles Airport. I'm looking for my connecting flight." And she said, "Chess, don't you dare miss that flight. Those are good people you're working for," right? Simple little things. And by the way, this happened well over 10 years ago, and we still talk about it. Kent Murdoch nailed it, right? We call that a wow moment. What are you doing to wow people, right? And so often to me, yeah, the big things can be a big wow. It's the little things over time, I think, that build the culture that really have impact. Well, how many of you ever received a simple handwritten note? I'm just kind of curious. Think about that for a minute. And did you keep it? I know it's old school. I know that that's something that it's easier to text. It's easier to copy someone on a blast email or Slack or whatever it might be, right? I'm telling you, it's a lost art. And if you will take the time to write, and don't just great job, thanks, Bob. It's tell them exactly what they did, how it tied into the vision and mission, the impact it had on the customer of the organization, and just a sincere thanks. I'm telling you, it'll take you less than a few minutes. Put a stamp on it, mail it to their home, and it'll get there. I guarantee you that everybody on this webinar at some point got a short letter or a little thank you card in the mail, and they kept it, and it came just at the right time. I challenge folks. I say, look, write 3 notes a week for 3 weeks and see the impact it has. Just 3 notes a week for 3 weeks. Get back to me on that. I promise you. As we coach, and we've gone into executive coaching now, as we do this executive coaching and there's some friction, this is one of the things I teach my executives right away. I said, look, buy a stack of thank you notes. Look for what's going right. Drop a little note. You don't have to put a gift card in it. You don't have to attach it to a big plaque or a balloon, although that would be fun, right? Just send them a little sincere note of thanks and see what happens. See what the reaction is. Well, here's our fourth quiz. And it's who is Chris Hadfield? Have we got this one all lined up, Div?
We're loading it right now. Okay, so it should be up, folks.
Perfect.
So the question, who is Chris Hadfield? 4 options in front of you.
Yeah, take a look at that picture. I mean, what does that look like? Does that look like a biology teacher to you, a fireman, an after-school driving instructor, or an astronaut? Let's see how we're doing here. Biology teacher's getting a lot of play. This is fun. So, Div, have you ever been to Canada, my mother country?
I have. I lived in Seattle for 2 years, so we made it over the border to Vancouver and Victoria, and spent a little bit of time in Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa as well. I love Canada. I've always enjoyed my
Yeah.
trips there.
No, and you might imagine growing up in Vancouver. I mean, it's just so spectacularly beautiful.
Yeah,
I'm glad you had that chance.
yeah, it was fantastic.
Okay,
All
so
right,
we're up to
folks, we're
about
going
a
to take
minute.
about 10 more seconds here to go ahead and get votes in. I see over 90% of you have now voted. So let's just get your vote in if you haven't already. Just a reminder, this is the fourth of our poll questions today, fourth and final, and voting is required in order to earn CP credit today. All right, so we are going once, going twice. Okay, so let's go ahead and close it out. So Chester, we ended up with 36% for astronaut, 26% for after-school driving instructor.
Yeah, is it a pretty even split on this one? Well, I'm here to tell you that he is an astronaut. In fact, he is a Canadian astronaut. If you're Canadian, you knew who Chris Hadfield was. He's quite famous. And I know what you're thinking. Canada has astronauts. Yes, we do. Okay, we've had three, but no one more famous than Chris. And I call him Chris because we met at a conference, and he really is a remarkable individual. Well, here's what's really interesting about Chris. While he was up in the space station, he had a really diverse team. He had 3 Russian cosmonauts, 2 American astronauts, and then of course he was the commander. And it was a perfect, illustration of the modern day team, right? A lot of diversity, different culture, language. There was 30 years difference between the youngest astronaut and the oldest, right? Language barriers and so on. And they trained for over 12 years to get up into the International Space Station. Now, while Chris was up there, he did all kinds of podcasts and webinars. He even sang David Bowie's A Space Oddity, and it went viral. And the country is so proud of Chris that they've actually put him on the back of the $5 bill. He was one of less than 200 people to take a walk in space, and they put him on the back of the five. I mean, seriously, how cool is that, right? Usually to get on money, you've got to be like royalty or a dead royalty, right? So the fact that he got on the $5 bill, I think, is extraordinary. What makes it even more poignant is who he replaced on the $5 bill. And that was hockey players. Now, if you know Canada, if you're replacing hockey players, you better be a big freaking deal. You know what I'm saying? I tell you this story because here they are, 6 grown men in a very confined space. And they're there up in space for 6 months. And Chris said, we had one of the most productive 6 months in the history of the space station. And it was due to one unwritten rule we had. We obeyed all the written rules for sure. The unwritten rule was every astronaut had to perform one random act of kindness for every other astronaut every day. Isn't that interesting? Back to the human side. And he said, it was those little things, cleaning up, I'll do the calculations, let me cook dinner. Every day it was, I'm cheering for you. I'm rooting for you. You're on my team. I care about you. I got your back. I love you. And he said, because of that, we never had a heated argument. We never had hurt feelings. It was all about the work. And that's why we were so productive. Well, here's a couple of ideas for you. I've highlighted handwritten note. A Rolex watch, a little pat on the back, give them your time, right? And a pat on the back is different than a slap to the head, right? It's a spatial relationship there. Well, we're in the home stretch here. We want to leave a couple of minutes for questions, but if you want to make your day better, go appreciate somebody. Go tell them thank you, that what they did mattered, that they made a difference, and you noticed, right? We've got the roadmap. It's statistically just rock solid. We've got the case studies to back it up. And of all the numbers, this is the one I love the most. When you're highly engaged and happy at work, you're 150% more likely to have a happier life overall. Well, pick 3 things out of the webinar. Maybe it's engage, enable, and energize. Maybe it's thank you notes. Maybe it's now, often, specific, and sincere. Check your ratio. Maybe it's just one random act of kindness. Trust me, the basics everybody gets. You have to have it. It's the little things that you do over and above that build great cultures that are high performance and deliver. And never forget this, do it at home, right? This is why I come to work every day. These are the people that mean the most to me, and I hope that it'll be the same for you. Well, I think we got a couple of minutes for some questions. Let's open it up, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We've got all kinds of papers we publish and all kinds of ideas, and thecultureworks.com. We've got free stuff there too. If there's anything we can do to help you build the culture you want, we're happy to do it. And that's my story, and I'm
Great.
sticking to it, Vin.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Chester, for all the great information today. This is really interesting, and I've heard you speak before, but I think you had a little bit of a different angle on it today, and some more specific points that I hadn't heard before, and that really, I think, connected with a lot of us who are listening. One question that came in earlier, and I unfortunately deleted it by accident, but I remember the question was, what if you already have an established culture? Is it still possible to go ahead and make these changes once that culture has been established?
Yes, I think it is. And it's a great question. I think every team has its own culture. And regardless of what the mission, vision, and values of the organization are, in your particular group, there's always going to be a nuanced approach to that, right? Customer service may be a really high value. Well, in your group, you may not actually interact with the end user customer, but who are your internal customers? So there's always going to be a bit of an interpretation there. And I think that is appropriate. And that's where you can really start to build the culture that you want, and build that trust and so on. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. So there's still a portion that you can focus on, regardless of what the bigger environment might be.
Absolutely. And by the way, thanks, Dev, for participating with me on the webinar. I always think it's more fun to have 2 voices rather than one just droning on and on. And Tom's done a great job behind the scenes. I wanted to make sure to thank him and Sharon for setting all this up. It's always a pleasure to be invited back, and you've invited me back a couple of times. And that's the ultimate compliment for a presenter. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so thanks to Tom and Sharon for their work today. Thank you again, Chester, for participating today, and for what you had. For anybody who has not downloaded the PDF yet, it's still available there under the Handouts tab. If you're for some reason not able to access it, you can shoot an email to marketing@accountantsworld.com, and we can send you a copy after the fact. Couple of final notes I wanted to mention here. Our next expert webinar is 1 week from today at 3 p.m. Eastern, August 29th, 3 p.m. Eastern. That'll be Hitendra Patel from our own Accountants World. He'll be talking about uncommon client insights that can power your firm's future. Hitendra has a long background as a futurist in the accounting industry and looking at what's coming up. So don't miss that one. You can register for all the remaining expert webinars at 2018webinars.com. And if you'd like a live personalized demo of Accountants World solutions for accounting and payroll, you can visit AccountantsWorld.com or give us a call anytime at 888-999-1366. So thanks again to all of you for joining us today. Thank you to Chester for his presentation today, and we look forward to seeing you again in a week.
Yeah, you know what? I wanted to interject just one quick thing. I know Hitendra Patel. He is wonderful. Don't miss that webinar. He's a great guy. You'll love it. Just a little plug for my friend.
I appreciate that. Thanks again, Chester. I really appreciate your time today.
You bet. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Oh, sorry about that. Are we all done or are we still talking amongst ourselves?